Okay, Winning Plays podcast is back, and we are on location, coming from you from the dreary sights of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where it is cold. It is the first week of May, and it feels like it could be the dead of winter after the Celtics drop a game 3, 103-101 to the Milwaukee Bucks on Saturday. My name is Brian Robb, joined my partner in crime at masslive.com, Souichi Terada. Make sure you're following him on Twitter. That's at SOUICHI Terada, TERADA. Souichi, how are you? Thanks for joining the show.
Wow, you nailed the spelling of my name. It's always weird to hear somebody else say it, but things aren't too bad, I guess. Besides the weather, the food is cheap, as we learned in Milwaukee. Yes. I tell everybody I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Michigan. Things are much cheaper when you're not in Boston, believe it or not. And the food is pretty good, just because there's really not too much to do in the Midwest. Like, I'll be the first one to say that. So, like, what do you do in Milwaukee? I'm not sure, but you can't eat a lot of cheese curds and drink a lot. So that's simply one of those things that you can do, and you just roll with it, just because there isn't too much to do in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I like the city for the most part.
No, the curds is right, and that's probably what the Celtics were doing after Game 3, just stuffing their face with curds in their sorrows after a pretty incredible finish, to be honest, with the amount of stuff that happened in the final there. And we're about a day out from Game 3. We're not going to go too much there. So I want to start here by just taking a more forward look at the series right now, and I'll pose this to you. What is on a scale of 1 to 10? What is your confidence level that the Celtics come back and win this series altogether right now, just based on what you've seen so far and what you expect to see over the rest of the series right now?
Ooh, win the series? I would say probably a 5 or 6. Maybe, yeah, right around a 5. I would say, just because I came into both. The two sets of games, the games 1 and 2, I thought they would split it. I thought they would split 3 and 4. So that still is very much so in play. I expected them to win last night and drop Game 4, so maybe it'll be flipped. I also expected them to win Game 1 and lose Game 2, so that was also flipped. So I don't know. For the most part, though, I think you look at Game 3, you look at how poorly they played, especially that third quarter, especially that entire first half, really, right? The first 3 quarters weren't exactly great basketball from the Celtics, and they still had a chance to win. Realistically speaking, we can say whatever we want. We can break down Game 3 as much as we want, but the bottom of the line is the Celtics only lost by 2, and if they had 2 more seconds on the clock, that game was probably going into overtime. So I just think you feel okay, I would say, if you're a Celtics fan, just because Tatum played really the worst postseason game of his career, and you lost by 2 on the road. And sure, Derrick White played well, Al Horford played well, Jaylen played well in the fourth, all those factors come into hand. But I think the Celtics are really, they're more than okay grinding out a game. And I think compared to Game 1, I thought the physicality from the Bucks, they really bothered the Celtics in Game 1. Whereas Game 3, I thought both teams were just throwing haymakers at each other, and that's probably why there were, people were complaining about the refs, because both teams are throwing haymakers, and now all those things are going to get called. So I think you feel good about it. I think you feel good about the mental fortitude of this team, especially after what they went through in the regular season. So all things point to me being hey, it could still go either way. Obviously, Game 4 is a big swing game, but if you can get home court advantage again, I think the Celtics can take care of business in 5 and 7. It really depends on how tomorrow night goes, which I'm curious to see. I think it could go either way, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, that's gonna be a biggie. There's no question about that. But I mean, I'm a few in taking the glass half full view here of, you just look at, the talent on the floor through 3 games and the adjustments that have been made right now. And I'm not sure either team has much left in the cupboard right now, barring a surprise Chris Middleton return far later in this series. And so, the Bucks dropped their triple big lineup. They went smaller. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's the area where the Celtics really need to take advantage of it more heading into the rest of this series. And as part of that starts with Tatum and, not delivering an absolute done. We'll get into him a little bit more later. But when the Bucks put Grayson Allen into the starting 5 and also have, Portis out there at points coming off the bench with just less help, less rim protection help around him, not playing with Giannis and Brook Lopez, like the Celtics just need to get after those matchups like a lot, because those guys have a target on their back, and they did. And that's, I think, a big part of why they got back in the game in the fourth quarter of game 3. Mm-hmm. But they need to be, I think, just more relentless with that. Yeah. And in the Bucks' decision to say, okay, we want to spread the floor more around Giannis. But you're giving up a lot defensively, I think, for the Bucks if you do that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too, just because I remember one play yesterday when Jaylen just went right at Giannis, and Giannis didn't really contest, because I think it was like sometime in the third quarter, and Giannis already had 3 fouls. And that's another thing too about just continuing to attack them. Like, I was like, the Celtics should just keep attacking Giannis. Like, obviously, like, he's Giannis Antetokounmpo, but like he pretty much like gave up like an open, like a free layup. I thought there was going to be more of a contest, but he was clearly just conscious of foul trouble. And I think that's just one of those things, right? Like in game 1, we saw the Celtics were, like I said, like they were bothered by the physicality, but at the end of the day, like they just didn't attack enough. Whereas I think they're being a little bit better about picking and choosing when they do attack, and that puts a lot more pressure on the Bucks, right? Like if Giannis is in foul trouble, like who do they have behind them? Like you mentioned Chris Middleton, but like I think at halftime it was something like Giannis and Brook Lopez are both shooting above 50%. Like the rest of the team was shooting like, I forgot what it was, but it was like 30% or something like ridiculously low. Like that's, I think, why you would feel optimistic if you are the Celtics, because I don't think game 3 would be close if Chris Middleton was there. Because like Holiday, he hit the pretty much an icing shot and everything, but he wasn't exactly doing great offensively. Like besides Giannis, like there aren't that many options, and I think that's what's allowing the Celtics to hang around even when they are not playing well in games 1 and 3. So in terms of attacking them, I just think you have to put more pressure on them. Like you mentioned, like I said with Giannis and foul trouble and everything. Like if you can kind of neutralize him as much as you can, like they did in games 1 and 2, like that's a completely different ball game for game 4.
Yeah, so and the decision making plays a big part in that, in terms of when you go after them and him and Lopez, and when you kind of pull back. But yeah, like the being aware of when he is in foul trouble, not wanting to pick up that extra spot like that play you mentioned, and then just getting better with reads and like forcing, like if you can attack other players and then Giannis has to become a help defender, then you can get him in rotation, and then you make the couple extra passes. And they did that. It's the same old story of this team, Souichi, all year. Like we see this in phases, and then it goes away. And now it's like, okay, you're not going to be able to do it to 48 minutes against the Bucks, but you're probably going to have to do it for like 3 quarters. You're probably going to have to like really lock in, unless you shoot the lights out like you did in the first half of game 2. And that's something where, I mean, obviously Tatum was a big red flag in game 2. I don't think Marcus Smart had a particularly good game on second look. Everyone kind of had like some dumb turnovers, and then, Smart shooting. You give him some slack there since that was his first game back, and you're not going to expect him to be there. But like, you're going to need, better from just setting the table from guys like that to be able to, get into the teeth of the Bucks defense and not have 2 quarters where you combine for 36 points.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the turnover thing is truly the one that you shake your head at, just because they've mentioned this like multiple times. Like they've been a really good team defending the Bucks in the half court, whereas especially in that third quarter, like you saw the turnovers, you saw the transition buckets, you saw, and I think that's my biggest takeaway, or not my biggest takeaway, but like one of the big takeaways I've taken is just like from the first 3 games is just, if you can get the Bucks playing in the half court and they slow it down, like the Celtics are good enough to just bother Giannis, to bother the rest of the team. But if Giannis comes at you downhill with like a full head of steam, like how are you going to stop that? Like you just can't, right? So I think that's I think the most frustrating part if you're a Celtics fan, probably. Like you see all those turnovers, you see all those like transition opportunities, and it's just easy buckets. And quite bluntly, the Celtics aren't getting those same looks in transition. Like it seems like, I think I forgot who said this yesterday, but they keep going up against these big guys, Brook Lopez or Giannis or someone, and they just don't seem like they have a plan when they go up. And that leads to turnovers, that leads to more Bucks points, and that leads to easy buckets that if you were playing in a half court, like it won't be nearly as easy for the Bucks. So I think it's just easy opportunities that just keep adding up. And I think that's why, even in game 2, like when the Celtics were shooting light out, like that's why the Bucks are kind of able to get back in it when Giannis had his big third quarter. So, but like you said, like you just need to play at least 3 good quarters. And the Celtics only didn't do that in game 3. They still had a chance to win. So it's a strange team, but I just think it's weird how this very this roster with a lot of playoff experience just has these like lulls essentially like in the third quarter yesterday.
Well, it's just there, and I mean, we both wrote about it at Mass Live over like last 24 hours. Just some, you had a nice breakdown of the play-by-play the last 2 minutes, and just going through like the decision making there, and pointing out there's like one play where Jaylen Brown in the last, with a crucial possession, Celtics down 1, like 30 seconds left or so, and he makes a great play to go like to shake Holiday, but then he runs into the trees at the rim. And like you said, like he kind of went up there without a plan. And that was a situation where if it was there, like, great, like you take that shot. He was great all fourth quarter, and like it wasn't there. And that was a situation where like game 1 against the Nets last year, you think they learned in that situation. Okay, it's not there. Let's reset. Let's recycle here and get a good look. And too many times in the last minute of that game, whether it was Brown on that play or Smart turning down a wide open pass for Jaylen for a 3 in the corner, which is just a better look you want to get for that guy than the play before that. You're not going to get away with that against the Bucks in these type situations, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think I liked your take on the Marcus 3 just because it was open, it wasn't in and out, all these good things, but I thought the extra pass to Jaylen, upon further looking, like I thought the extra pass to Jaylen in the corner was like the exact type of play you saw on the buzzer beater from Marcus against the Nets. Like,
right.
Realistic, like Ime said post game of that, after the buzzer beater, like that would have been a fine shot, realistically speaking, especially with like 3 seconds left. But Marcus decided, hey, let's see what I can do with these 3 seconds, and obviously found Jason for the game winner. And I thought it was kind of the same thing where at the end of the day, like the shot is fine, it went in and out, like it very much so could have gone down, but like crunch time, like if Marcus makes that pass to Jaylen, like we don't know obviously if Jaylen's going to hit that corner 3, but it's the great shot that the Celtics keep talking about over the past 2 weeks, right? Like that they want that to be part of their identity, and I thought that would have been a perfect time to do it.
They saw how good it looks, Souichi. They had a taste of it. You think like that they turn a corner, but it's like no, it's like they can't help themselves at times.
Yeah, and then So here we are discussing a loss, even though a 3 there. I think the maddening part too, right, is like I think that was the same possession where Jaylen missed a 3, then Marcus missed a 3. Like if either of those go down, like we're talking about a completely different situation. Funnily enough, like Grant got the first offensive rebound, but then he actually had I thought he had a decent chance at the second one, the one that went off his right hand and just went out of bounds. Like who knows, right? And I don't know. B-Rob, I don't know how you feel about it, but I just think there's such like a luck factor when it comes to closing out clutch games, right? In terms of the timing and everything. But like I wrote about it in the piece at Mass Live, but like the Drew Holiday shot that put them up 3, like that was realistically like all things considered, I thought it was pretty lucky. Like it bounced in, like you kind of got tangled up with Tatum. Like credit to Holiday for making that shot, but right, like that could have easily been a miss. And then we're talking about a completely different situation. But the Celtics are only down 1 with a dozen seconds left. Yeah. And realistically, like a miss there, I was wondering it too before the play. Like if Holiday missed that, I think maybe Ime rolls with just letting, doesn't call a timeout, similar to game 1 against the Nets. So I saw a lot of parallels there, right? And it's just like basketball's such a fickle thing, especially like down the stretch and everything. Obviously you're on the road, so that's a little bit different. But I think there's just like a luck factor where the Celtics weren't, if they had 2 more seconds on the clock, right? Horford's tip-in probably goes in. So, but I still think you can kind of, look back at the decision making and come away a little bit frustrated if you're a Celtics fan, just because things could have been better. If one bucket, one play, it went differently, like yesterday.
Yeah, there's all sorts of complaining about the officiating, but to your point, the bottom line, the game was there for them. Like they were up 1, they had a chance to go up 4 on multiple occasions. They had chances to get stops on Holiday and Giannis to play before that, and then those guys they executed. And the Celtics didn't, and that's where we are. So heading more into Monday here, like what do you we saw the tweaks the Bucks made. George Hill came back. He wasn't really much of a factor at all. I honestly barely noticed he was on the court. But if you are Ime here heading into game 4, like are you mixing anything up based on what you've seen from guys in this series so far, based on just how this thing is progressing and what the Bucks are trying to do with you? Not even like I don't expect a starting lineup change or anything at this point, even though I think you could conceivably just start Grant and just like go with your best lineup out of the gate. But I don't think they're gonna do that yet. That could be a 3-1 move. But yeah, like what do you see from that standpoint?
I think like the one starting lineup move would be that. I mean, Grant comes in at like the 8-9 minute mark.
Yeah, he's coming in early. Anyway. They're not going to do that. Like sub in early.
Yeah, exactly. So he's not starting, but he is playing all the minutes and everything. One thing I would probably want to see is just like kind of getting Al a little bit more involved. It just seems like there are spurts where obviously Al played great in Game 3, but there are spurts where he clearly shows like he's got kind of the juice going, and it just doesn't seem like they call his number as much. I would probably want to see Al a little bit more involved. I probably want to see Derrick White a little bit more involved just because he did hit a couple threes. It was funny. Like, I don't know how you felt about it, B-Rob, but like I look up and I'm like, oh, Derrick White has 14. Like, hit a couple threes, get into the free throw line a consistent amount. He'll do the, he does the Derrick White things where like he'll play solid defense, he'll make the right pass, he'll pick up a few assists that you don't even notice. Like, he's a very low key player, but I would try to ride that a little bit more just because quite bluntly, like I wrote about Peyton Pritchard and like how he's ready to shoot his way through the playoffs, but like if those threes aren't going down, like it is a tough ask to kind of ask, throw him out there and everything, even though Giannis was on, Peyton was on Giannis and Giannis passed out twice, which I still can't get over. I thought that was the funniest thing from Game 3 that I went to go watch it back on replay and I just laughed. But I think
too intimidating.
Yeah, right. Like the 6 foot dude from Oregon. But I think you look at those two guys and I really just think like you just need more from Jason and Jaylen. Like even Jaylen, like he had 15 in the fourth, I believe, yesterday. Like he needs to do better in the first 3 quarters. Like he can't be that passive, right? Like I think he was like decent efficiency. He had 12 points through 3, and then he exploded in the fourth. But it's just like you need more. Like if you had a couple extra buckets in the third and you not double up, that could make a difference too. So I think you look at all those factors, but I'm curious to see how Ime works. Folds in Al and Derrick and Al especially just because he mentioned this yesterday real quick, but it's just he like the Bucks, they're obviously dropping in coverage. Like Al needs to make those threes to keep them honest. And he did that a lot in the fourth quarter yesterday. And that was a huge part of the Celtics comeback. So I think getting him a little bit more involved would be beneficial for the Celtics, I think, especially if he can, especially if he's hitting those threes on like the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I mean, he's been just an absolute force in this series. I mean, all postseason period. But now in this series, he's shooting, 43% from 3 on high volume. He's averaging a double-double, just cleaning up on the glass. When he's playing at this level, like this is like, if he's doing that, if you told me he was doing that before the series started, I'm like, okay, this looks like taking care of business here. And it's somewhat going to waste from that standpoint. But to me, like, where are you? I think one of the biggest X factors going forward in this series is like, I think the Rob Williams situation is fascinating to me because you can make a case either way for him. Like he had pretty solid numbers overall: 10 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, 3 blocks in just 23 minutes. But he was also team worst minus 13, and it's like it kind of reminds me of Rob Williams from like a year ago, of where he has these really nice sequences. But then he's also like getting lost or like bulldozed at times defensively. And so it's clear that, like Grant Williams, like your best defensive lineup now has Grant Williams in place of Rob. But the offensive rebounding and the rim running stuff should be something you could use here against the Bucks. But Rob almost seems kind of hesitant around me. He had a couple chances to like just throw it down on like, and then he is back to like the pass out to the 3, which is like, okay, like, no, you need those shots here. Celtics are getting plenty of threes. Like, so I think that's gonna be a tough one for Ime and I think it's just gonna have to be a nightly read now in terms of what you're getting from him and how much, if this is like a good Rob game or a night where you want to move away from him after 15 minutes or so and just roll with Grant.
Yeah, and I don't know. To be fair to Rob, like you're asking a lot out of him, right?
Oh yeah, it's just not a good matchup, and it's a tough matchup for him regardless, even with the surgery too.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I thought too. Like obviously Grant brings a lot of different things you might need, especially for this series. And I think I wrote about this from last night, but it's just like his shooting and his physicality, especially like match up very well, specifically against the Bucks and what they want to make the Celtics do. And it just, not to say like Robb is soft or anything. I don't think that whatsoever. But it's just like I think he's a little bit for somebody who racks up so many blocks. Like he is more of like I would say like more of a finesse player than Grant, especially. And I think that's kind of part of it. And then you look at just what you're asking him to do, right? Like a month after Minsk surgery, like if the physicality bothered Robb a little bit after like a month off, and then you play like however many, I think it was like 26 minutes against the Nets, like that wouldn't surprise me at all. So I think you kind of see some tentativeness to Robb too. Like I think with like some of his putbacks where I look at that, I'm like 2 months ago, Robb was like flushing that down without like any second thought. Whereas like now he just, I don't know if it's just a mental thing, a physical thing, but just he clearly looks tentative out there, and I think that's affecting him a lot of ways. And really, I thought that decisiveness was like pretty good throughout, for him throughout the regular season, just because like it wasn't just on offense, like he was kind of getting more familiar defensively, like where to be and all those things, and that was a big deal. Whereas now, I think he's just like Tatum, like I think he's just like maybe overthinking a little bit, and that kind of contributes to like him second guessing himself at times out there.
Yeah, it's certainly gonna be something to watch, but I think that's really like that. You didn't think about just the, what he's coming back from and just what that's done with his, feel for the game.
Mm-hmm.
Just after that kind of a layoff and being thrown into a series like this against a front line like this. So it's going to be a big test from here. Like, and the Celtics obviously could certainly use, the offensive boost down low from him. But if that's not there, then I think you just have to go away from him more. But that'll be something to watch in the series. One other development, and we brought him up briefly already, Souichi, but I want to get your more of on this. The Derrick White factor, just Derrick White like emerging from the rubble in this series of like giving the Celtics something offensively, which is what they traded him for, which is I don't think everyone like thought this could happen. He kind of broke through, and I think just anyone's gonna have a good shooting night. But to me, when I rewatched some of Game 3, and I wonder for the rest of the series now in terms of how the Bucks are defending, like White seems to be able to get to where he wants to go against the Bucks secondary, whether it's Connaughton or Grayson Allen. They're obviously not going to put Drew Holiday on him because they got to use him elsewhere. So that kind of makes me think like, all right, can they just like let Derrick White kind of, run the show even more? He only played 21 minutes in Game 3, but I think when you're playing like this, you should push for more of Derrick White here, because I think for whether it's him scoring or setting up your offense, like that's kind of what you need to beat a team like this Milwaukee squad. Yeah,
and that's why I thought Marcus, even like we said, like he didn't exactly excel in Game 3, but I saw just having Marcus and being able to put, or I guess being able to put Holiday on Marcus and keeping Derrick right like free, and like you said, like having like you got to be able to punish the Bucks eventually by having Compton and Grayson Allen and those guys out there, and I think that's where Derrick does come in, and right, like it might not necessarily be through the shooting, but like he's done a decent job getting to the free throw line even through his struggles, I thought, and like that's why I think I think it was like Game 4 or something against the Nets. Like he still ended up with like 10 points and like took like 4 shots or something because he went to the free throw line a ton, or not a ton, but at least a few times to help those numbers. And right, like I think that's kind of why he's so quiet. Like you're like, oh, Derrick White's at the free throw line again. You don't really, if you're not like paying attention, you kind of don't realize those things. So for the most part, though, I think Derrick, especially like. I think they're getting more and more comfortable in terms of him like running the offense and everything. And I'm curious to see how that will look, just because you do have a lot of offensive weapons, whereas Derrick is kind of this forgotten guy, and for good reason so far. So, right, like I think a 14-point game from Derrick White is exactly what you would expect. Like if he goes like 25 plus, he would be like, I just don't think that's like quite in the cards. Obviously he can get hot, but like that's not quite in the cards in terms of like how the Celtics want to use him. So I think you take the 14, you'd be happy with it, and you see if you can, milk a little bit more, just because he was quite effective. Even, people on press row were joking, like, I think he made like a floater early, and they were like, whoa, Derrick might made a shot. I'm like, all right, guys, let's calm down. Let's calm it down a little bit here. Like this dude is fine. He's just, in a little bit of a new scenario, new team with the Celtics. So
yeah, it's been a bumpy road, but again, his track record speaks for itself. And this is because you just add in like the defensive, elements that he has. And so anything at this point, it's like anything you get from him on offense is a bonus. But then if it's like, okay, if he can turn into a Spurs self, then and that's like your 4th or 5th best player in the floor can like put up, that type of things. And maybe even make the Bucks think twice about like, oh crap, what do we how are we going to handle this guy now? Do we have to like kind of change things a little bit in terms of how we're guarding the other guys if White gets out of the box? And so that's something I think that they need him to continue being aggressive in game 4, and then like kind of bottle up what he did in the second quarter and the fourth quarter at times. And now it's a game of 2 that's like, if he has it going, and Ime did this well in the Nets series, and Smart's giving you like a 1 of 8 or 1 of 9 night, I don't think you should automatically go back to Smart there. Like, especially coming off this quad injury, like you're going to go from, traditionally, but if White has it going there, you have to, I think that has to be a consideration. This is a luxury that you want to use if it's there.
Yeah. And I think the idea of White when they traded for him, right? Like as a 6th man coming off the bench, like I think the idea of White is what makes him so valuable, just because like, right, like if you sign him into the starting line, like he'll be fine, he'll contribute, he'll do his thing. But him being able to feast on those second units, I think especially it's like where he needs to find like the most value. And who knows what that means in terms of minutes. Like maybe Ime does want, Derrick to just be like a guy that feasts on second units and everything like that. But I think that's kind of the theory of Derrick White was essentially the 6th man who's going to come balling off the bench. But that's not quite his play style. But I just think that's where he has the most value, especially, if he can, make a few decent defensive plays, like he's good on the perimeter, like that's where you can go, and that's where you should go with Derrick White. Like, don't expect too much. Even if he is missing a bunch of threes, like I still think he brings a lot to the game, whether it's making the right pass, he'll rebound well, he'll defend well, he'll do all the little things that, people, I don't know, like I thought fans would love that kind of player, but I guess, the missed shots did kind of take a precedent just because there were so many of them. So that's kind of where I kind of stand on Derrick White there. That
hurts, but right now, I mean, he's up to 40% from 3 in the series. The problem is he's shooting 27% from the field. So that's that needs to, continue bumping that up to get the fans back on his side. All right. Any other closing thoughts here for, Giannis had 42. Do you like how they're kind of handling him in this series? And after a game like that, should they overreact to anything? I mean, I think they stuck with mostly single coverage there, and even the times where they sent 2, that was a trouble spot for them in terms of giving up the open looks there. So, what do you? I'll honestly ask you this: do you like Al or Grant more on him? Like in terms of, obviously both are going to do it, but I'm wondering, beginning to wonder like who is the best. If you have like the last minute of the game, are you putting Grant on him or are you putting Al on him?
Ooh, I don't know about that one. Actually, that's a good question. I don't know. I think I would prefer Al for like one possession, right? But I think I would for like the whole game, or like if you have to split it, I think I would prefer Grant a little bit more on Giannis, just because like I don't know, like Grant does a really good job of just like getting on to like Giannis and like even KD skin. Like there are multiple times when they're just like shoving him and just like doing all these things, and I think that kind of adds up mentally over it. But I think like if you give me one possession, I think you go with Al, just because this the size I think really helps, and I don't like, you don't want to tire out Al over the course of the game. Whereas like if you ask him for just one possession, I think he can really kind of dig down and get us up on Giannis. But in terms of like changing anything, I think like Giannis obviously scored 42 and he looked great out there. He looked like the 2-time MVP, et cetera, et cetera. But realistically, like he shot 16 for 30, right. 1 for 6 from 3. Like, like obviously like decent efficiency, and not from 3, but like he hit his shots. But I think you look at that and you're like, okay, like this was his best game of the series by far. And he could have like done even more damage. Like I think he would have dropped 50 on pretty much like, any other team besides like the Celtics and like a few other top defensive teams. So I think you feel good about what kind of limiting what Giannis was able to do, just because you could tell he was getting frustrated, and that's why his post-game comments are about the diapers and not criticizing the refs. So that's, I think the Celtics are doing a justifying job on Giannis, even if he does score 42, just because he's going to get his. He's a 2-time MVP. That's what happens. And it comes back to the fact that quite bluntly, like it was still a 2-point game for game 3 that could have gone into overtime. And that's with Giannis going, Superman basically. So.
Right. And like you're right, like 42 points is impressive, but when it's 30 shots, it's like, okay, that's like, not god awful if you're the Celtics, especially if you're not doubling him a lot. And so I think the concern is going into 4 is like, you haven't had a game here where like the Bucks shooters have like gone nuts, which I feel like is is due to happen at some point. But whether, the Celtics offense is just that good enough where they can say, we're not going to just let you guys get these open looks to do that. And as we've come, if they can take away transition, that's pretty much where if they stop bitching to the officials and like giving up 6 or 9 or 12 points a game. And I guess we'll end on that. Like this was really bad. Like going back to the film, there's like the grand play in the first half that Tatum had a really bad one. I think Tatum was like literally bitching about a play at the end of the third quarter, like over the course, the span of like 3 plays where he just like was dog shit on those. Yeah. And they just need to like, they can't do that against a team where it is absolutely killing you when they run. Like it just can't happen. And I mean, we'll see if they're figuring this out too late or not, but that's something that, like, if nothing else, like they just need to work their ass off to get back every time, no matter what happens. And that they did not do enough of that in game 3.
Yeah. And I don't know. You'd think by how much Ime hates the bitching to the officials that they would learn, but like, right. I don't know, doing it.
Tatum looked like it was a preseason game.
Like, come on, man. It's like game 3 of the Eastern Conference semifinals against the reigning champs. Like you have like, what is it? Like that was what 90th game with Ime, like I feel like that should just stop. But here we are watching them bitch. So who knows? Maybe they'll do it again in game 4 anyway. So
it's something to watch. And I mean, Tatum is what it is. The fact that he, to me, more than what his shooting looks like in game 4 in the rest series, I'm going to be more curious to see what his other stats are in terms of like rebounds, assists, et cetera, after like 1 rebound in game 3 was like, wow, I wonder how much that wrist is bugging him, or just like if he was just that disengaged.
I mean, he downplayed the wrist thing, so we'll see. I don't know. Yeah. Like if you want an excuse, it was served up on a silver platter and he declined to take it, and credit to him.
Yeah, right.
Like honestly, like
he did bring it. He brought it up though, so he's hedging it nicely.
That's very true.
But no, it'll be fun. So game 4 coming up Monday night. We will be there in attendance to break it all down for you, but with full coverage at masslive.com. So make sure you're checking Souichi out there, as well as on Twitter at Souichi Terada. And now it's just back to stuffing our face with cheese curds and and other beverages ahead of game 4.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be great.
All right, thanks for listening, guys. Make sure to check out Souichi's stuff. As always, he'll be back throughout the playoff run here, so stay tuned for more of that, and we'll be back talking to you guys with some game 4 reaction later this week.